welcome to our community. Susie Thomas here with you this morning, visiting with a longtime friend, Doug Lane. You know his name. He is on stations of other ilks. And
I figured it out. I've been in 13 different cities on about 25 different frequencies.
Is that right?
Yeah, since 1969.
So who doesn't know you?
Well, people up and down the dial across the country, I guess. It's
Not too many, but... And then somewhere along the line, you decided that public service was your thing. And so now you are here as president of the North Canton Chamber of Commerce. So welcome.
Thank you.
And first of all, Doug, what drew you to that?
Oh, it was actually a variety of things. I mean, I got here in 1988, and all the time I was here, and you know this from working with me, I was very much involved in the community, specifically North Canton, because I lived there, but also through the other radio station, the various things that happened around the community. So between working with the chamber and the city on different community events over that time, and then when I was on council, I was obviously involved with the city government. And then when I ran the census office for a couple of years, you know, that again put me on a different level. So when the job opened up in '09, they were looking for somebody who could do marketing, could do sales, could do media, could manage. You know, I mean, I looked at all these things, and they were all kind of in my wheelhouse.
And almost like initials are DL.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
so, you know, I applied, and I was one of the 5 finalists, and eventually going through the interviews, I ended up getting the job in March of 2009. And part of that was because the chamber was transitioning. We started in 1959, and our whole purpose when we got created by these visionaries was the fact that North Canton, and at that time a very sleepy Plain Township, really didn't have, or a Lake Township for that matter, didn't have an advocate for their businesses. There was a Canton Chamber that's been around over 100 years, Massillon Alliance, but they were focused on their communities, and that was about it. And so they decided to put together a chamber in North Canton in 1959. And so, you know, all of the things that worked well when the Hoover Company was there didn't work so well after the Hoover Company left. And I was on council when that happened, so you could see what was going to happen down the line. So at the end of 2008, the board at that time made a very strategic decision to go in a different direction, to bring in somebody that could work with government and that could take us to a different level economic development-wise than we had been for many, many years prior to that. And no bad reflection on the years before. It was just a new reality. And so that's when the position opened up, and that's why I ended up getting it.
Canton has its own personality, doesn't it?
Very much so.
Definitely distinct from Canton, East Canton, Canton South, and then there's North
The
Canton.
minute you cross the line, you get a different feel. You know?
What is it?
You know, I've never been able to quite put the, I guess, my arms around the entire thing. I think it's just a feeling of community. I mean, you go into a community with sidewalks and people are walking and kids that are there, small town atmosphere, yet, you know, you can go to Washington Square and get anything you want there. We've got new shops opening up. I think a lot of it has to do with the infrastructure. I mean, the minute you cross, and this again is nothing wrong with Jackson, Canton, Lake, Plain, the minute you cross into our city during the winter, I mean, those roads are clean. It's like it didn't snow.
You know exactly when you've hit the line.
Yeah, and you've got police at your house within a minute or two, tops. Same thing with fire. And so I think it's just that feeling of a small town in the middle of a lot of big towns. And I think that's what it is. And that's, again, no bad reflection on any of our neighbors. But I think it's just something that community has had since its inception as New Berlin.
Tell me a little bit about the history of the chamber and your work there.
Well, again, goes back to 1959. I got there in '09, so they figured after 40 years it's time to make some kind of a change. I don't know if I'll be there for, you know, another 33 years, but our whole goal at the beginning, and I think we were able to refine it after I got there, and that's advancing community, uniting business for a common good. And we have a very long mission statement, but that basically boils it down. And so, again, we work closely with government. We work with the Stark Development Board. We have an education corridor that nobody else has. When you sit right where we're at, to our west you have Stark State and Kent State Stark. We have Walsh within the city limits. Just to our south is Malone. To our east is Mount Union. Just to our north is Akron and Kent Main campus. We've got an unbelievable school system. We also have school systems around us that are unbelievable. And so when you look at that education corridor, the opportunity for us to work with them on projects of mutual interest is unbelievable. So we're right in the middle of that. We work with some of the other chambers, the Hall of Fame on the Hall of Fame Village project. We work a lot with the arts community. And I'm also part of the Stark Carroll Oil and Gas Partnership, which started a few years ago as Stark County Oil and Gas Partnership, and we expanded down into Carroll. So we work on, and again, it's not so much advocating with the major companies, but it's advocating with those companies to hire local labor and work locally with our various businesses. So that's kind of our sweet spot.
So are you seeing an increase in job development and opportunities in the North Canton area because of these relationships?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've got the Hoover District, which, we can talk about here maybe in the second section. But things have happened in Washington Square. We've got several new businesses that have opened. There are several on the horizon, mostly small businesses. But again, that's where we're at now. And I think through and I do want to talk about squirrels in our second section too. So, yeah, not the tree squirrels, but the Squirrels Company, and I want to talk about them and what all they're doing. So there's a lot happening right now, and again, I think it's taking that small town feel and making people feel comfortable enough to be there. I mean, you got, a low tax rate. We've got free parking that you don't have everywhere. We've got a very low crime rate. Again, police at your house in a minute or two. All of those things combine to make that not only a good place to live, but also to work.
Do you find, because of that you're not losing young people? Do people tend to stay? You do have all these colleges and
Unfortunately, no. We're doing the same brain drain as others. And what's interesting is they do come back. It takes a while. But we're like most communities, and I think they're seeing, greener pastures. And so that's why things like squirrels and some of these higher tech operations are going to be, I don't want to say the savior because we have to have a mix of everything, but I think they're going to showcase and hopefully provide some opportunities for people, particularly what the schools are doing with the Fab Lab and some other things, to make them think that maybe we can get our start here and go visit those other places. You don't have to live in a Columbus. You don't have to live in a Cleveland, because they're an hour or two away for something you might want to do. But you got this great house here with a low tax rate and great schools, and it's going to appreciate in value. But we have to make those offerings for those young people to make them stay. Like I said, I lived in 13 different cities over my career, but, I got here in 88. I haven't left. I'm not going anywhere. So
nowhere better. We're speaking with Doug Lane. He's president of the North Canton Chamber. You mentioned that North Canton is involved in some way with Hall of Fame Village. Now, I would think that was a little more up the road.
We are one step removed. You know how Kevin Bacon, you're always like 7 steps. Okay. Stu Lichter, who's the developer of that project at the Hall of Fame Village, he's the general contractor. He also is doing the Hoover project, and he's also doing the Goodyear project. Matter of fact, I believe his company, IRG, owns more land in Ohio than the state of Ohio owns. And so there's a synergy there that, again, Don Shula's is going to go into the Hall of Fame Village. Well, maybe there could be a Shula's too in North Canton, and it's the same developer. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but having a left pocket, right pocket thing puts us in a whole different ballpark than somebody that might be sitting on the outside looking in, because it's important for him to develop this project as much as it's this Hall of Fame Village. And we've tried to touch base with Stu and IRG as much as possible and work with them, because that redevelopment of our core part of town is an important element of anything that we're going to be doing. You can't have an empty factory sitting there forever. And there's a lot of success there. We've got about 1,000 jobs there on a daily basis that you don't see because they're in the office part. When you go by the front of the building, not only is there a snow fence around it and it's not developed yet, you don't get that feeling that there's anything happening, but there really is. And again, it's behind the scenes. So once they get the 131 apartments in, once they get the 10 restaurants and shops in, once they redo the parking area in the front and landscape it, get some different lighting, put the fountain in, put the smokestack back up, that's going to take on a whole different feeling.
Oh, this is such good news.
Yeah.
The smokestack is coming back.
That's what they say.
And a fountain and so forth.
Yeah.
Is there a timeline for all these wonderful things?
Depends on the month. I'm trying to get that nailed down even as we speak, but I know it's under contract, I'll put it that way. And there aren't a lot of people that take down and put up smokestacks. So you're pretty much at their disposal. It's like calling a plumber. If they're backed up for 10 weeks, you've got to call another plumber. But unfortunately, in this case, there aren't other companies that do this work. Yeah, so I know it's under contract. And the other thing, that project took historic tax credits. So there's certain things that they can and they cannot do, that they have to keep the integrity of what it used to look like. So they have no choice but to put it back up or forego those credits.
Okay. Does that have something to do with history as well? Or the
Yeah. In other words, it's a historic site and has been designated as such. So there's certain things you can do to it and certain things you can't. And so you can't arbitrarily just change it. And so again, if you take those tax credits to preserve the history of that operation, then you have got to do certain things. And one of them is put the smokestack back up. And the letters go back across, from what I understand, too, across the front of the building. Yeah.
I can't imagine a more beautiful inner city.
Not many people have a charming factory in the middle of their town.
Exactly. That used to have flower boxes on all the windows.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, and we when they left at the end of 2007, basically June of 2008 was kind of the handing over the keys time. But since that point in time, and it's been 6 years, or I guess it'd be 8 years now, right? Yeah, 8 years. IRG bought that in 2009. And then we hit a recession, so it took a little while to get back on their feet. But they very much are committed to finishing that project. And going back to your original question, is the fact that the same developer is doing Hall of Fame Village. So I see a lot of possible synergy going on there as people come and go. And the same thing with the Goodyear project in Akron. You have a corridor here that you could develop simultaneously.
Well, that Hoover building, that Hoover Company building, there's also continued to be the great tradition of the Christmas tree lighting and so forth. All of these things to help describe that community that you...
Yeah. And again, and this is a good example of that, the Hoover Company, the employees gave the tree, they decorated it, they provided everything for it. Over the years, and obviously with them leaving, there wasn't much, you couldn't go to an employee and get a tree. So they had a temporary tree that we put up there one year, and then we planted one. And we, being the city and the chamber, picked up the slack and decided to keep this tradition going. And then that got cut down in the plans. So now we have a permanent tree that comes and goes in the park across the street. And so, again, the community reached out and said, we can't let this 50-plus year tradition drop. So we do that the first Sunday of every December, and we have the choirs come and the high lows and the high notes, and then we have kids' activities, and it's just a very small town thing. But you'll fill up that park with 400 or 500 people on a nice night. If it's bitter cold, you might get 100. And most of those are the family members that are watching their kids freeze. And then Santa Claus comes on the fire truck. A few years ago, the chamber contracted with the schools, and we built a Santa house. So Santa and Mrs. Claus, we haul that over right down the middle of the street into the park right before the event, and then we take it back to the school for storage after. And so all of us working together on this thing, because otherwise we could have said, well, Hoover's gone, so is that tradition.
It's so wonderful. Hoover was gone. A lot of families in North Canton took a huge hit there.
Oh, yeah. And so did the city, about $1.5 million in income tax.
There you go. How did you were involved at that point, how did you keep the morale up to where it is?
It took a while, and I left council right after that happened. That had nothing to do with it, but I was gone, but I segued into this career. I think it was just a matter of a lot of people that hadn't been involved. In other words, 3 generations, let's say, in a family were relying upon Hoover. But there's a 4th generation or a 5th generation that doesn't. So it was a matter of those people stepping up and saying, look, this place is gone. It's not coming back. We need to do something different. So how can we make this work? And then having IRG swoop in and say, well, here's a factory. We know what we do with these things, and have them come in and land it was a godsend at that point in time. And then we got people behind the chamber behind it, the city behind it, the Stark Development Board, and other people that were able to coordinate this and keep moving it forward. And then it took those first or second generations people to see that this is the direction we're going now, and then they came on board. But it was a transition. I mean, I still talk to some people who think they're coming back, and I said, no, not going to happen. But we will have small manufacturing there, which would be great.
We're speaking with Doug Lane. He's president of the North Canton Chamber of Commerce. Going to take a break. You're listening to Our Community.